Father, how old is Han Xingyuan? Father, where is my brother? Father, I want to find my brother. Father. Above the clouds. Hanju was annoyed. He really wanted to throw this girl down. Han Qinger smiled proudly. I'm not afraid. I can fly. Hanju glared at her and didn't mention Han Tua. Han Qinger was so angry that her eyes turned red. After that, Hanju brought his wife and daughter to the immortal world. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Han Qinger had already grown into a young girl. She wore a beautiful red dress and her long hair was tied behind her head. She was in high spirits as she walked with Qingwaner. They looked like sisters instead of mother and daughter. Hanju stood in front of the two women and looked at the sky. Father, where are we going next? Han Qinger asked, her eyes filled with anticipation. Please, reading on my box, Vel. Calm. Ever since she was young, she had been very happy and had no worries. She could see new things every day and didn't need to spend any energy on traveling. It was very easy. Qingwaner smiled and said, Qinger's potential is indeed not bad. Back then, your brother didn't have your talent, but he still resolutely left alone to seek immortal encounters even if his potential was mediocre. At the mention of Han Tua, Han Qinger became interested and asked, Mother, what's my brother's cultivation level now? Didn't you say that he lived for 5 million years? Is he a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal? In the immortal world, many living beings had lived for 5 million years but could not break through to the deity realm. Her mother was also only at this realm. She thought that Han Tua was stronger because she had always been looking forward to seeing the brother she had never met, and she even worshipped him. Qingwaner shook her head and laughed. She glanced at Hanju and, seeing that he didn't want to say it, could only say, perhaps. Hanju had instructed that Han Qinger could not know the realm above the sage realm to prevent laziness. Qingwaner could understand this. At least after she knew that Hanju had surpassed the freedom realm, she felt that it didn't matter if she cultivated or not. In any case, she couldn't catch up to him. She wouldn't be in danger or cause trouble for Hanju as long as she stayed by his side. Han Qinger curled her lips and said, if we can't see Big Brother, then we'll see Second Brother. Father, can we visit Second Brother before we go home? He might already be born. Hanju didn't even turn around. Of course, I have to go back and take a look, but your second brother is still not born. Why isn't he born yet? Could it be that eldest mother is not human but a demon? Of course not. It's just that your second brother is too talented. Too talented? Han Qinger's eyes lit up. Hanju snorted. Stop asking. He waved his right sleeve, and the three of them arrived at the reroll world. Below were the 18 peaks of the Jade Pure Sacred Sect, but the landscape had long changed. Han Qinger asked curiously, what is this place? Why is there no one here? Qingwaner also looked at him in confusion. Hanju said, this is the place where I was born. Hearing this, Qingwaner and Han Qinger became interested. The three of them landed on the ground. Hanju walked in front and his thoughts returned to 5 million years ago. Qingwaner and Han Qinger looked around and didn't disturb him. Hanju came to a cliff and looked at the mountains. The glorious appearance of the Jade Pure Sacred Sect in the past appeared in front of him. Endless disciples ran rampant in the mountains. Hanju thought of Elder Iron, Li Qingzi, and Taoist Nine Cauldrons. Father, there's someone on the opposite mountain. Han Qinger suddenly pointed ahead and exclaimed. Following her gaze, he saw someone cutting trees in the forest opposite. There was no one in a radius of 10,000 miles. It was indeed strange for a woodcutter to appear here, but this didn't attract Hanju's attention. Han Qinger rolled her eyes and leaped into the forest opposite. Chingwaner did not stop him. That woodcutter did not have any cultivation. Even a bad person couldn't hurt his daughter. Han Qinger landed behind the woodcutter and snorted. The woodcutter trembled in fear. He turned around and staggered, falling to the ground. The axe slipped out of his hand and accidentally cut his palm. Blood instantly flowed out. The woodcutter frowned in pain. Han Qinger panicked. Sorry. She noticed that the woodcutter was also young. He looked to be in his early 20s. The woodcutter picked up the axe and asked warily, "Who are you? A demon?" She was so beautiful and wore a red robe. She was definitely a demoness. The woodcutter's face turned pale and he broke out in cold sweat. Demons ate humans. Han Qinger curled her lips. "I'm not a demon. I'm a fairy." She waved her right hand, and the wound in the woodcutter's palm instantly healed. The woodcutter stood up and ran away. Han Qinger raised her hand and waved, using her spirit energy to move him back. "Why are you running? I'm really not a demon. I came to ask you why you're the only one nearby?" Han Qinger said angrily. The woodcutter said with a trembling voice, "I live nearby. There's indeed no one else around here." Han Qinger asked in surprise, "You're so timid, but you still dare to stay here alone?" The woodcutter gritted his teeth and did not answer. He began to think of a way to escape. "Why are you here?" Han Qinger asked. She added, "I won't make things difficult for you if you answer truthfully. I can even teach you cultivation techniques." The woodcutter's eyes lit up. "Then, why are you cutting trees?" "I have to start a fire. There are many beasts at night. I'll die without a fire." Oh. This was the first time Han Qinger had seen a true mortal. She was filled with interest and began to ask all sorts of questions. The woodcutter told her everything he knew. Han Qinger also learned of his background. The woodcutter's village was slaughtered by fiendish cultivators and all of them were refined into dried corpse puppets. He was lucky to escape. He had always wanted revenge and had been searching for immortal encounters since he was 10 years old. However, he did not have any cultivation potential and the various sects did not accept him. He could only pursue the illusory legends of immortals. Han Qinger couldn't bear it when she heard this. Just thinking about it from the woodcutter's point of view, she felt despair. "How about I help you take revenge?" Han Qinger asked. The woodcutter's eyes lit up. However, he immediately shook his head and said, "No, I want to take revenge personally. Please teach me the cultivation technique." Han Qinger looked helpless and spread her hands. "Actually, I don't know any cultivation techniques, but I can ask my father." After living for so long, she had never cultivated seriously. She relied on her talent. The woodcutter immediately knelt and kowtowed. "Thank you, fairy. As long as your father is willing to teach me the cultivation technique, I'm willing to be your slave and serve you forever." Han Qinger didn't answer the woodcutter. Instead, she flew to Hanju's side and told him his background. "Father, should we avenge him? He's too pitiful," Han Qinger said indignantly. She had never encountered such a calamity, so she didn't dare to imagine what she would do if she faced such a situation. Hanju said, "Many people are suffering in the world. Do you want to help them one by one?" Han Qinger was stunned. She didn't expect him to reject her. Chingwana shook her head and said, "Qinger, you've been protected too well by us since you were young. You've never seen the suffering of the mortal world. People like him are everywhere in the world. There are tens of thousands of mortal worlds below the heavenly Tao." Han Qinger was silent. Hanju looked at the woodcutter and said softly, "There are indeed cultivation techniques here. Let him find them. As long as he finds them, he will have a chance to seek revenge himself. Isn't that what he's looking forward to?" Han Qinger asked. Where are the cultivation techniques? Let him find it himself. He won't give up if you tell him there's one here. He'll find it sooner or later. Fine. Han Qing'er curled her lips and flew back to the woodcutter to inform him. Qing Waner sighed. This girl is so innocent. How can we let her go out alone in the future? Daughters were different from sons. They always made parents more worried about safety. Hanju smiled. That's why I brought her here. Qing Waner asked in surprise, could it be that you already know of this person's existence? Of course. Otherwise, why would I bring you here? Only I can reminisce upon the scenery. You can't empathize. Hanju shrugged. Hearing this, Qing Waner looked worshipful. Could the legend of the immortals here be? Yes, it's the cultivation technique I left behind. Qing Waner was even more surprised. However, she calmed down when she thought of Hanju's cultivation. In the forest. After Han Qing'er explained, she said, as long as you're willing to find it, you will definitely find it. Good luck. The woodcutter hurriedly said, how should I repay you? Han Qing'er smiled. Take care of yourself first. How is following us now repaying you? Although she had little experience, she was not stupid. Wasn't taking this person in as a slave the same as protecting him? Han Qing'er leaped and quickly flew away, not giving the other party a chance to speak. She landed in front of her parents and smiled. I've already explained it clearly. Hanju nodded in satisfaction. He was very satisfied with Han Qing'er's performance. She was not unreasonable and disobedient, nor was she kind-hearted and controlled by the other party. You still have to be careful if you encounter such a thing in the future. How do you know that what the other party said is true? Qing Waner reminded. Han Qing'er said, he shouldn't be lying to me. I don't think he's lying. She looked at Hanju and asked, Father, what do you think? Hanju said, I don't think it's important. I wouldn't care if he was telling the truth if it were me. Han Qing'er curled her lips and muttered. What are you saying? Nothing. Han Qing'er shook her head and left for the nearby forest. Hanju smiled and didn't say anything. He left with Qing Waner and strolled around the forest. They left on that day. They arrived outside the 33rd heaven and entered the Buzhou Palace. Han Yu was meditating and cultivating when he heard footsteps. He opened his eyes and hurriedly stood up and bowed when he saw that it was Hanju. Greetings, ancestor, Han Yu said respectfully. He then glanced at Qing Waner and Han Qing'er, secretly curious. He didn't dare to deduce, afraid that he would offend Hanju. Han Qing'er's eyes lit up when she saw him. Her gaze moved back and forth between Hanju and Han Yu in surprise. Qing Waner was also stunned. Compared to Han Tuo, Han Yu was more like Hanju's son. The one beside me is Han Tuo's mother, Qing Waner. The other is my daughter, Han Qing'er, who is also Han Tuo's younger sister. Hanju introduced simply, scaring Han Yu so much that he hurriedly knelt and bowed again. Even sages had to bow to their ancestors. Qing Waner hurriedly helped him up. Her eyes lit up as she stared at him and smiled. Too similar. I didn't expect Tuar to have a descendant like you. I heard that you've already attained the Tao? You've really done us proud. Han Yu was extremely nervous and said, it's all thanks to ancestors' help. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. Han Qing'er asked excitedly, you're a sage? Qing Waner's eyelids twitched. She knew that something was wrong. She had let it slip. Han Yu did not answer immediately. He was a sage, after all. After being around for so long, he could naturally understand the implied meaning. Han Qing'er asked because she didn't know. He noticed Qing Waner's expression and couldn't help but smile. What sage am I? I'm just cultivating here. In the immortal world, a zenith heaven golden immortal can also be considered to have attained the Tao. Han Qing'er was enlightened. Hanju looked at Hanyu in a different light. This kid is so eloquent now? It was unknown what Qiu Shilai or another sage would do in this situation. In any case, Li Daokong was not so smooth. Hanju shook his head and laughed, not stopping her. He had brought Han Qing'er here because he wanted Hanyu to recognize her as his disciple. In the future, Hanyu would take care of her when Han Qing'er came to the heavenly Tao. He believed that Hanyu could do it. Hanyu was very nervous when facing Han Qing'er. Although he could tell that Han Qing'er was not even 20 years old, the pressure of seniority made him unable to breathe, especially with Hanju beside him. He was afraid that he would be negligent and offend him. Every word was said after careful consideration. Several hours later, Hanju bid farewell to Hanyu. Han Qing'er giggled. She had a good impression of Hanyu. He was different from the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal she had imagined. He was very gentle and spoke nicely. Of course, she also understood the reason. So, she was even more curious about her father. She suddenly realized that she didn't know her father's identity. Hanyu heaved a sigh of relief after sending Hanju and the other two off. With a great-grandmother above him, Hanyu's mood was rather strange. However, this great-grandmother was lively and smart. She was very easy to get along with. He wondered how that ancestor was doing. Hanyu actually felt very guilty ever since he knew that Han Tuo didn't leave him in the lurch, but he did not say anything. He didn't have the chance to see Han Tuo again. Ancestor, where are you now? Why aren't you returning to the heavenly Tao? Hanyu thought silently. With Hanju's cultivation level, he was already guarding the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao was developing so well now, but Han Tuo did not return. He suspected that he had hurt him. Back then, he had said proudly that he wanted to surpass Han Tuo. Han Tuo might be afraid of hurting him and decided not to return. Hanyu sighed and sat down again. He closed his eyes and continued cultivating. After leaving the 33rd heaven, Hanju and the other two didn't stay long in the main Dao field before they teleported to the 3rd Dao field. It's been a long time. I almost forgot about this place. Home is still the best. Han Qing'er walked out of the Taoist temple, stretched, and looked around with a nostalgic expression. Beside him, Qing Waner covered her mouth and laughed. You'll regret saying that. Han Qing'er asked, why? Qing Waner sighed. Your father is going into seclusion next. So be it. It means that you can't leave. It's fine. He'll bring me out after his seclusion ends. Do you know how long he'll be in seclusion? How long can it be? Wait. Mother, do you mean that father will be in seclusion for a long time? How long? 100 years? 1,000 years? No way? Han Qing'er's face turned pale. She had encountered many cultivators in the immortal world. When cultivators mentioned mighty figures, they said that they would enter seclusion for 1,000 years. Although Han Qing'er had just returned, she was still looking forward to the immortal world. She had been thinking that after cultivating at home for a period of time, she would go to the immortal world alone. Qing Waner shook her head and laughed, revealing a mysterious smile. Han Qing'er was shocked. Could it be more than 1,000 years? All right, go and meet the disciples of the Dao field. You have to start cultivating in a few days. At that time, I'll teach you how to cultivate. Qing Waner patted her head and smiled dotingly. Then, she walked towards the 100 living beings under the tree in the distance. These living beings still looked like boys and girls after 10 years. Han Qing'er was attracted by them. She did not expect them to still be so young after so many years. She immediately jogged over. On the other side, in the Taoist temple, Hanju started cultivating again. He felt that these 10 years were longer than hundreds of thousands of years of seclusion. His thoughts settled when he entered seclusion. Time passed very quickly. In these 10 years, he had brought his wife and daughter to travel and saw and learned every day. Naturally, he felt that it was long. Hanju felt inexplicably uneasy after not cultivating for too long. He was afraid that he would slack off. He had to maintain his cultivation attitude forever. Otherwise, he might fail even if he became the strongest. Since ancient times, countless people had changed at the peak of the strongest. Juniors would always rise when the strongest person wasn't paying attention. Just like Hanju now, he had casually entered seclusion for 100,000 years. If it was another talented cultivator, they would have already risen in this time. Someone like Pangu might appear after 100,000 years. Hanju's Tao heart stabilized as he thought of this. In the depths of his soul, the primordial world expanded even faster. In a palace, the divine-robed Taoist's expression changed when he looked at the 5 figures in the hall. 5 great divine punishers. Dressed in silver armor, Han Tuo stared at the divine-robed Taoist and said, "You should understand why we came." Tian's expression was mocking. Their mentality had begun to change ever since they became divine punishers. "Understood. I won't stop you," the divine-robed Taoist said. He sighed in his heart. Master was really powerful. Although the 5 divine punishers were free, they had already begun to appear in the chaos. Han Tuo said, "We want to stay in the chaotic domain under your jurisdiction for some time. Gather the freedom sages and the great Tao sages. We'll give you 10,000 years." The divine-robed Taoist nodded and had no objections. He only pretended to be aggrieved. Han Tuo was very obedient in his heart. He thought that Han Tuo was a pawn planted by Hanju in the great Tao divine spirits, so he didn't dare to appear close, much less reveal his relationship with Hanju. The divine-robed Taoist closed his eyes and began to send voice transmissions to the freedom sages and the great Tao sages. Tian looked at Han Tuo and asked, "The heavenly Tao is in this chaotic domain. Should we go back and take a look?" "Heavenly Tao!" The other 3 divine punishers were curious. The battle of the divine authority generals shook the chaos. The divine might heavenly sage was even lauded as the strongest person in the chaos. They were naturally curious. They didn't dare to underestimate the divine might heavenly sage even if they became divine punishers. 20,000 divine authority generals had been killed by the divine might heavenly sage. This was a true battle record. Every divine authority general was equivalent to a great Tao sage. Han Tuo hesitated. A divine punisher smiled and said, "Go take a look. Now that you're the divine punisher, you can be considered to have won honor for the heavenly Tao. Perhaps you can ease the relationship between the heavenly Tao and the divine spirits." "Yes. This is a good opportunity. Perhaps this is also the intention of the ultimate God." The 3 divine punisher experts agreed to go to the heavenly Tao. They even believed that this was the ultimate God of punishment's main goal. Exploring the great Tao divine spirit domain was only a pretense. What they really needed to do was to build a good relationship with the heavenly Tao. Han Tuo said helplessly, "All right, we'll return with the heavenly Tao sages after meeting the chaotic sages." Han Tuo rolled his eyes. The other 3 divine punisher cultivators teased Tian. Universal Hall. The sages gathered. Everyone present was a heavenly Tao sage. Heavenly Venerate Xian Du, Heavenly Venerate Wufa, Pan Xin, and the other freedom sages were not present. The sages chatted among themselves. Dozens of heavenly Tao sages gathered here, looking quite lively. The current sage circle had already been divided into several small circles. It was worth mentioning that these small circles were mainly made up of old-school sages. They seemed to be roping in factions and fighting openly and secretly. At this moment, a figure appeared in front of him, revealing Heavenly Venerate Xiandu. The hall instantly quietened down the moment he appeared. The sages were in an uproar. They had been worried that the divine robed Taoist was plotting and wanted the freedom sage to go with his main body. Heavenly Venerate Xiandu and the other freedom sages were also worried at first, but they were no longer worried after learning the identities of the 5 great divine punishers. 2 of them were actually from the Heavenly Tao, and 1 of them was the son of the Divine Might Heavenly Sage. They naturally did not have to worry. In fact, that was the case. Alright, everyone, don't worry. The 5 divine punishers are only here as guests. They're most likely afraid of the Divine Might Heavenly Sage and want to ease the relationship between the chaos and the Heavenly Tao. There's no need to be so tense. Young Che looked at Qiu Shilai and asked, Senior, should we tell the Heavenly Sage about this? Qiu Shilai said, Of course not. Do we need the Heavenly Sage to personally receive them? They need to perform well. Besides, to put it bluntly, the 5 of them are just freedom sages. The Heavenly Sage killed 20,000 Great Tao sages with his sword. Do you know how strong a Great Tao sage is? Senior Foolish Sword Sage is a Great Tao sage. It's equivalent to killing 20,000 Senior Foolish Sword Sage with a single strike. Why can the 5 great divine punishers directly see the Heavenly Sage? Qiu Shilai's words were firm and powerful, immediately sweeping away the uneasiness in their hearts. That's right. The Heavenly Tao had the Divine Might Heavenly Sage. What was there to fear? That's right. With the Divine Might Heavenly Sage around, we don't have to be afraid at all. The Heavenly Sage has always been in seclusion, but he'll definitely sense it if the Heavenly Tao is in trouble. Speaking of which, even the chaotic mighty figures didn't dare to mistreat me when I mentioned my identity as a Heavenly Tao sage when I traveled the chaos previously. That's right. The development of the Heavenly Tao is already unstoppable. This time, we have to receive the 5 great divine punishers to show our Heavenly Tao's magnanimity. The sages discussed and the atmosphere became lively. The new sages was very curious about the Divine Might Heavenly Sage. To the recently promoted Heavenly Tao sages, the Divine Might Heavenly Sage was a legend. It was extremely mysterious and fascinated them. The 5 great divine punishers arrived thousands of years later. They entered the 33rd heaven under Heavenly Venerate Xiandu's lead. Heavenly Venerate Xiandu was secretly shocked. The power of the Heavenly Tao actually did not stop the 5 great divine punishers. Why? Pan Xin and Heavenly Venerate Wufa's eyelids twitched. The group arrived at the Universal Hall. The sages gathered here. Their gazes landed on the 5 great divine punishers. They were all curious and did not bow. Tian glanced around and smiled. The development of the Heavenly Tao is indeed not bad. There are already so many sages. Tian was the reincarnation of a chaotic fiend celestial obtained by the Heavenly Tao spirit. It was equivalent to the reincarnation of the Heavenly Tao. Feng Liang, who had created his own Heavenly Tao sect, naturally felt a sense of familiarity. However, the current Tian had already surpassed Feng Liang in both power and cultivation. The son of the Heavenly Tao defeated the Heavenly Tao, so Feng Liang was naturally a little embarrassed. Han Tuo's gaze landed on Han Yu. The 2 of them looked at each other silently. Han Yu did not expect Han Tuo to be one of the 5 great divine punishers and be at the front. NAS. Heavenly Venerate Xiandu led the 5 great divine punishers to the front. The sages sat down. The word's worry made the sages nervous. The divine punishers smiled. They had been out for some time. They would be nervous no matter who saw them. As time passed, they naturally developed arrogance. Han Tuo was the same. The 5 great divine punishers had arrived, but the sages did not bow. They were even more arrogant than the great Tao divine spirits. This was not good. Once the heavenly Tao sages developed a disdainful attitude towards the great Tao divine spirits, it would only cause endless trouble for the heavenly Tao. Today, he was leading the 5 great divine punishers. He could ignore it. But what if other great Tao divine spirits came in the future? They couldn't always let his father clean up after them. Han Tuo felt that there was a need to teach them a lesson to prevent these sages from causing trouble again. Pan Xian smiled and said, "We're naturally not worried. We're not afraid of anyone in the chaos with the divine might heavenly sage guarding the heavenly Tao." The other sages smiled. They were not afraid of offending the great Tao divine spirits. They were already irreconcilable enemies. The current peace was just that the great Tao divine spirits could not do anything to the divine might heavenly sage. Since they were enemies, why should they bow? Heavenly Venerate Xian Du said, "I forgot to introduce you. This divine punisher is the divine might heavenly sage's son, Han Tuo." The heavenly sage's son? The sages were moved. Yi Tian chuckled. "My name is Yi Tian. I'm the divine might heavenly sage's divine spirit son." The other 3 divine punishers rolled their eyes. This fellow was too shameless. He was really damaging the 5 great divine punishers' reputation. Han Tuo shook his head and laughed, but he did not say anything. "So, you're the heavenly sage's son. Then, your family. May I know how fellow Taoist Han became a divine punisher?" The South Extreme Heavenly Venerate asked with a smile. Han Tuo didn't hide anything and talked about his background over the years. The other 3 divine punishers also had their own bumpy experiences, but they were not familiar with the heavenly Tao and naturally would not share them. For a time, only Han Tuo's voice was left in the Universal Hall. The sages listened to him. The hidden sect sages looked at him with pride. Han Tuo was Han Ju's son and would definitely inherit the hidden sect in the future. They would naturally be aggrieved if he was a good-for-nothing. Now, Han Tuo's performance made them very satisfied and even pleasantly surprised. Indeed, dragons gave birth to dragons and phoenixes gave birth to phoenixes. The news quickly spread to the hidden sect. The personal disciples in the second Tao field also learned of this through the myriad worlds projection. They gathered together to discuss this matter. Murongchi sighed. Grand Master's hands extend really far away. They landed on the 5 great divine punishers, and his son even became the leader. Great Loose Heaven's eyes flickered. Not necessarily. Perhaps this is also the leader of the divine spirit's plan against Sect Master. Everyone thought about it and agreed. Han Ming frowned. It won't be good if the divine spirit's leader can control Han Tuo's will. Guan Bubi shook his head and said, "How can Sect Master not know what you're thinking? Since he knows, it means that he has absolute confidence. How could an invincible person be plotted against? How could someone who could be plotted against be invincible?" At this moment, the heavenly constellation Fiend Celestial walked over and shouted, "Guan Bubi, enter the simulation trial and fight!" Guan Bubi immediately stood up and said, "So be it. Today, I'll remove your title as the strongest Fiend Celestial." The others who were chatting about Han Tuo looked at each other and found it funny. Their worries vanished after being reminded by Guan Bubi. That's right. Who could scheme against Han Ju? Time passed quickly. In the third Tao field, Han Ju opened his eyes. It meant that after 100,000 years, his cultivation level had improved greatly again. He was getting closer and closer to breaking through. He had wanted to break through in one go, but his heart softened when he thought of Han Qing'er. He sent a voice transmission to her, asking her to enter the temple. Bang! Father! Han Qing'er shouted, her voice filled with grievance, resentment, and surprise. She had waited too long for this day. 100,000 years. She was about to go mad. Many times, she wanted to barge in forcefully, but she was stopped by Qingwaner. In order to defeat Qingwaner, she had no choice but to start cultivating. Qingwaner also worked hard to cultivate to not be surpassed by her. You're already 100,000 years old, but you're still in such a hurry. What's going on? This girl was still so rash. Indeed, maturity had nothing to do with age or experience. Without experience, she would still be a child even if one was 100,000 years old. Han Qing'er suppressed her anger and said aggrievedly, 100,000 years. You're basically locking me up. How can a father be like this? The word lock was used well. Hanju felt a little ashamed. Hanju could cultivate diligently because he died early in his previous life and had a trauma. Han Qing'er had no friends since she was young. She didn't suffer at all. In terms of happiness, it was nothing much. Other than not having forced labor, she was no different from a prisoner. Hanju remained silent. He could feel that Han Qing'er was really aggrieved. She had always been by her parents' side since she was young. After growing up, she had been locked at home. He probably would not have been able to stand it if it was him in his previous life. Seeing that Hanju didn't finish, Han Qing'er's eyes turned red and tears fell like beads. She was so angry that her body trembled. Seeing his daughter cry, Hanju asked, "You're already a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal?" Han Qing'er immediately smiled through her tears and said proudly, "That's right. I'm powerful, right? Not bad, but not as good as me." TCH then, what was your cultivation level when you were 100,000 years old? Han Qing'er was diverted by him and asked unhappily. Hanju said seriously, "You might not believe me, but I had already attained the Tao at 100,000 years old." Indeed not. Han Qing'er curled her lips, feeling that her father was bragging. Although she knew that her father was very powerful, she did not know his identity. Ever since she was born, she had never seen her father attack, so she naturally did not know his strength. Hanju smiled and said, "Cultivate beside me. You will gain powerful abilities. Father won't stop you wherever you want to go. You have to know that this is something that all the living beings in the heavenly Tao don't dare to hope for. The other cultivators wander around because their cultivation has encountered a bottleneck. They need opportunities and Tao techniques. You don't need them." Han Qing'er snorted. The Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal Realm is already very strong in the immortal world. Won't it be fine as long as I don't provoke those existences who surpass the Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal Realm? Hanju smiled. He couldn't say that this girl was naive. At this moment, a notification appeared in front of him. The ultimate god of punishment sent you a dream. Do you accept? Was this fellow finally unable to sit still? Hanju chatted with Han Qing'er while asking the system, "Will I be in danger if I accept the ultimate god of punishment's dream?" He would definitely not die. He was afraid that this fellow wanted to scheme against him. 1 trillion years of lifespan will be deducted. Do you want to continue? Continue. No. Good. Hanju secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he left a wisp of his will to chat with Han Qing'er and entered the dream. The dream was a void. Hanju saw the ultimate god of punishment. This fellow did not look like the leader of the divine spirits. He looked more like a god of slaughter who had killed his way out of the abyss. He wore blood-stained armor and had disheveled hair. His eyes were also sharp. The two of them sized each other up. The ultimate god of punishment was the first to speak, as expected of the divine might heavenly sage. I can't see through you. No wonder you can force the primordial ancestor god into a corner. Who is the primordial ancestor god? The previous leader of the divine spirits. The ultimate god of punishment was not fooled by his flattery. He smiled faintly. Not to mention 20,000 divine authority generals, just 10,000 is enough to suppress me. That was the first time the divine authority generals had attacked and suppressed the ultimate god of punishment for 1 trillion years. Speaking of which, it was all thanks to Hanju that the ultimate god of punishment could escape. The divine authority generals seemed undying and indestructible, but they required the dermic powers of the primordial ancestor god to be activated. The divine authority general was only a power that the primordial ancestor god borrowed from the supreme rules. If not for the primordial ancestor god, the divine authority generals would not have been born at all, much less attack the chaotic life forms. You should be able to see that there is a blank domain outside the chaos. In the long years, I discovered that the chaos has been expanding. I can't see its limit. No one knows how big the blank domain is. I want to see the limit of the chaos. The ultimate god of punishment smiled, his eyes filled with spirit. It had to be said that his words were infectious. His tone was filled with confidence and heroism. Although Hanju was not afraid of the ultimate god of punishment, it was better to avoid trouble. There was no need to make enemies. The chaos will be peaceful if you and I can reach a consensus. It will be the blessing of all living beings. Hanju said, I don't deserve it. How can I affect all the living beings in the chaos? I'm only a Tao pursuer. I don't want fame and fortune. I only want to pursue the Tao. It's the fortune of all living beings in the chaos to have a god like you. So tired. Why did they have to flatter each other? Hanju was too embarrassed to say anything. After all, he wouldn't hit a smiling person. It was obvious that the ultimate god of punishment wanted to please him. It would be perfect if it was really as he said. Your son was promoted by the primordial ancestor god. His intention was to scheme against you. But I won't. This child's tenacity has already obtained my recognition. He'll reach our level sooner or later. The reason I set up the 5 great divine punishers is not as simple as supervising the great Tao divine spirits. I want to support the juniors. We need fresh blood and more geniuses to protect the chaos, the ultimate god of punishment said with a confiding expression. Hanju almost believed him. Hanju asked, protect the chaos? What else can threaten the chaos? The primordial fiend celestial? The ultimate god of punishment shook his head and smiled. Primordial fiend celestial? That's only a rumor. However, the primordial chaos does exist. The ones who threaten the chaos are naturally the primordial life forms. The primordial chaos was destroyed, the chaos was born, and all the primordial life forms died. However, their grudges have always existed. They're at the bottom of the chaos, firmly suppressed, so they can't harm the chaos. I was suppressed by the primordial ancestor god under the chaos previously and have seen the primordial vengeful spirits. Although they're only vengeful spirits and can't threaten me, they can't be destroyed. This is the possibility of harming the chaos. By the way, the birth of the inauspicious evil came from these primordial vengeful spirits. A long time ago, during the battle of the 3,000 fiend celestials, the chaotic cheese Providence weekend, a primordial vengeful spirit escaped and transformed into an inauspicious evil. It constantly absorbed negative karma and grudges to strengthen itself into a race.